I don't know what I'm doing. Ew! Wait, just got back. Face looks a little bit oily. Lips look a little chapped and dry. It's okay, let's do this. Right, so let's see. Yeah, there's a lot that's happened over the last few weeks. Gosh, it just seems like there's so much happening in Kenya and around the world at the same time, and I feel like people are struggling to process everything. Disease, bereavement, celebration. It feels like a lot. I think the funny thing is sometimes I think this is life. There's different moments happening at the same time, and sometimes it's cataclysmic and sometimes it's not. But I know that from what I understand, or by speaking to older people, or even reading the Bible, it says, don't be thrown off by the things that are happening now. They've always happened. I don't know if I don't know if you guys recognize something along those lines. Comment down below if you know which verse that is. But it's basically like focus on and be present. Everything that's happening around you, the pestilence, the threat of war, climate change, death, disease, is not unusual, although it really seems like it's extremely unusual right now. Gosh, I feel like I've already started 5 things on my mind by saying a lot on my mind. So why don't I officially start 5 things on my mind by starting with the state of affairs in Kenya? And I think I want to start off with the death of President Daniel Arap Moi. By the time this video goes up, he would have passed away maybe 2-3 days ago. And for me, it was filming this morning is when he passed away. It's been very interesting seeing the reaction and the responses. I posted the breaking news image across my social media. I didn't put a caption. My digital space as well sometimes acts as a journal for me, or a photo album, and so sometimes I want to be able to put content up there that is a reminder for me of different seasons of life in my life, or whether it's in my country, around Africa, around the world. And so I just put a picture, and it was really interesting to see the comments. It's been very polarizing. There's the group of people who believe in one way or another that is the last regime that kind of allowed for rules and regulations, so to speak, some form of law and order. There's a whole other group that say he was just the beginning of toxic politics, or maybe just after Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. So I think my take home is everyone's going to process this differently. Some people will process it with a lot of hate. Some people will process it with a lot of sadness, anger, and I often feel like people have their right to process things in their own way. It's very hard for those who are on the side of good riddance to convince those who are saying we will never forget you or rest in perfect peace. It's very hard for those two worlds to come together, and you will collide based on the fact that your beliefs are so different. So I believe everybody ought to process this in their own way. And I feel like it's an example of our politics. It's deeply divisive, even in depth, which is heartbreaking, but it is what it is. So let people process it in their own way, because there's really nothing we can do about that. And that's my that on that. The other thing is BBI, Building Bridges Initiative, which started off with a handshake, and I think was supposed to set the tone for a more amicable political atmosphere, which has now become, I think, the formation of who will be with who come 2022 elections. And I believe that BBI is absorbing everything. It's absorbing conversations and absorbing, when I say absorbing, I mean it's taking over in a way that isn't healthy. People are so conflicted. I think a lot of Kenyans, a lot of Wananchi are saying enough is enough with the political mind games already. Can you just give us a moment? Sorry for the light change. It's almost it's 3:30. Huru will be home any minute now. So I'm sorry if I'm rushing through and blabbing, but I really wanted to do this segment before he comes home from school. And so this is what I think, our sentiments on the ground are heard. Whether or not there's going to be a change that comes out of it, I think we can only try. We delivered 2010, the Constitution, didn't we? As Kenyans, we did. That was our document. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was. And so there is a place and a chance, I believe, for Kenyans to say, listen, take back what you're offering us. Let us show you or offer you what works for us in terms of an amicable electoral process, an amicable political climate. And speaking of electoral processes, I do get very discouraged. Sometimes you're like, are we going to have a legit a process that's not marred by a lot of misinformation or clashing? And I know politics is so murky, I don't even like to touch on it, but I'm Kenyan and it's my country and it's my politics, and I believe I have a right to air my views. I was watching earlier how the Iowa caucuses in the US, they're having issues, technological issues in counting, in carrying out that process, and I was like, that sounds awfully familiar. So I feel like globally the political climate is pretty awful. It's bad in Europe, in the UK since they've Brexited, in the US, in South Africa, in Kenya. And I know that saying that may leave some of you feeling worse and having more voter apathy than before, but I still believe that we cannot afford to not go to the ballot and vote. It is our democratic right. It is up to us to vote wisely, to think long and hard about the kind of leadership we want, we deserve, long and hard, and understand that it comes back to affect us all. I think we're seeing that now more and more, right? So let's be cognizant of that and let's not ignore or say that isn't my thing, politics isn't my thing, voting isn't my thing. I think more and more now, let's say this should absolutely be a process that I want to participate in, learn more about, understand, be educated on, and make an educated decision. Nimeongea politics mingi sana. That is the first thing on my mind, the state of affairs in Kenya. In a nutshell. Did I just do that? So the second thing on my mind, which I don't want to delve too much into because there's so much information and misinformation around it, but it is happening around the world, is coronavirus. Here's what it is, and here's how they're saying we can protect ourselves. I'm literally going to limit it to that because I think we should all be aware. It's come from animals, and many of those infected either worked or frequently shopped in the Huanan seafood wholesale market in the center of the Chinese city, which also sold live and newly slaughtered animals. So new and troubling viruses usually originate in animal hosts. Ebola and the flu are examples. Some other coronaviruses that have been there are things like SARS. So that's one example of a coronavirus. Symptoms are very flu-like. People admitted to hospital, they may not get support for their lungs and other organs as well as fluids, and recovery will depend on the strength of their immune system. The health experts are starting to say it could become a pandemic. And should we panic? Apparently experts say no, not really. The spread of the virus outside China is worrying but not an unexpected development. It increases the likelihood that the World Health Organization will declare the outbreak to a public health emergency of international concerns. The key issues are how transmissible this new coronavirus is between people and to what proportion. So that's a little bit of a graphic for you all to know. Some safety tips. Clean your hands with soap and water, or alcohol-based hand rub, which is something I believe a lot about as a Lifebuoy brand ambassador, but also just as a parent, as a citizen. Please, we cannot undermine the importance of hand washing with soap. It genuinely saves lives. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing and sneezing with tissue or a flexed elbow. Avoid close contact with anyone with cold or flu-like symptoms. Thoroughly cook meat and eggs if you do eat meat and eggs, and avoid unprotected contact with live animals. That's as much as I'd like to say about the coronavirus because it's still a developing story. There's a lot of resources and information out there with news outlets and resource organizations. So please get reading it. There was a little bit of panic in Kenya not too long ago, but all the tests were declared negative. But let's always be cognizant of the things happening around the world because the butterfly effect. Let's just be aware. If anything, let's just be aware. The third thing on my mind is also pretty somber. It was a story that broke a few days ago, but I feel like it's been very heavy, and I want to understand why the death of Kobe Bryant and Gianna Bryant was so... people were emotionally devastated. And it takes me back to the first state of affairs in Kenya. This is something that I also posted about a little bit, and that was the Kakamega Stampede. You drop your child in school, and you leave them out there knowing that they'll be safe, they'll come home, and they die in a stampede. Children. And that's why I started this 5 things on my mind by saying it's been heavy. There's been a lot of heavy news back to back. I don't think people have even had a chance to process one thing before the next one is sprung on them. That was heartbreaking. And so going back to Kobe Bryant and Gianna, I think it was the sudden nature of the death and the fact that he was this global legend, that she was this 13-year-old soon-to-be basketball star. I feel like it brought out different feelings in people. It almost like, I don't know. It's a mystery, but it's not a mystery, the way the death of somebody that you don't know can shake you to your core. I think about that beautiful mother and daughter that passed away in the Likoni ferry, about a father and a daughter dying in a helicopter crash, about these children dying in a stampede. And you know something? Sometimes it freezes you in a moment of sadness and almost helplessness, because you ask yourself, who's next and what's next? And speaking as a parent of 2 beautiful young boys, it is haunting. It is haunting, and honestly, I truly believe we have to... there has to be a question of faith and purpose and passion, and knowing that our destiny is not in our hands and that we just have to be present. We have to be present for those around us, for the moments around us, and know that whatever happens next, there's nothing we can control. And honestly, I think there's going to be more bad news to come. That's how the world works, and I think I'm using this particular third thing on my mind as a very reflective moment to say, hey, listen, let's introspect and reflect and be contemplative, but let's also love hard and work hard and strive to be happy and fight for our happiness, because this life is so fleeting. It is so short. It is so... just anything can happen at any one time, and we have to try and be present. If you're not present, you can really get devastated by the tragedies around you. That's what I'm taking from all this. Is learning to condole with those who feel the loss, learning to condole with those who have experienced the loss, and at the same time, learning to carry them in our thoughts and prayers while still being present and hopeful about the future. It's the best we can do for those around us and for ourselves. The 4th thing on my mind is a little bit more encouraging, and that's, the people who are trying to create safe spaces. In my previous video, I talked about safe spaces where people can talk about matters mental health and get support for it, and thank you for some of the suggestions that some of you gave. Please look at my previous video in the comment section. You'll find a few people commenting on safe groups. This is really an opportunity to thank those who are creating safe spaces, especially those that I can say are in the limelight. And so please highlight those who aren't. And off the top of my head, the first person I want to thank who's currently carrying out a really powerful campaign that I'm proud to be a part of is Karen Lucas. Kaz, again, I shared her SoundCloud link the other day on the podcast I did with her. There's this incredible new campaign called Dear Law, which she graciously asked me to be a part of. And there's a lot of female lawyers who face sexual harassment, women who are fighting for the rights of women and men, but they're facing workplace-based sexual harassment, and so many are hesitant to talk about it, and so this is our chance to amplify their voices, albeit anonymously. And so please follow at Dear Law, DEARLAW, across all social media. Learn about the campaign. So we're asking people to send in anonymous letters to letters@dear-law.com. That's letters at DEAR-LAW.com. We want to help bring your voices to life. It's anonymous because we understand the sensitive nature of this process, and want to thank you so much for your courage, your bravery, and want to say we stand with you. You've stood with us for so long. It's now time for us to stand with you. So thank you, Kaz, not only for creating this safe space, but yes, for asking me to be a part of it. Other people that I'd like to thank include Valentine Joroge for what she does with Dada Sphere. It's a space where women are able to share stories and moments in their life in a very vulnerable way. It's a very safe space. And I believe it's creating a lot of healing, a lot of conversation. And Adele Onyango for Perspective. Thank you for creating a space where we can talk about issues that affect our society. And again, safe space. So I really just want to give a big up to you incredible people for creating safe spaces, urging you guys to share other names of people who are sharing safe places and platforms from which people can talk about the issues affecting our society, and having a call to action on what the rest of us can do. That for me is the fourth very important thing on my mind. And finally, Facebook as well, by the way. A huge thank you to Facebook for creating a safe space. So on Tuesday the 11th is Safer Internet Days with Facebook. They have a lot of resource and material for creating safe cyberspaces. I didn't even know that. I'm huge on safe spaces. I'm huge on online spaces that are safe, because those can be extremely toxic and tragic. So I'm going to link below some resources on the Facebook safety internet resources that they have. And on Internet Day next week, I'm going to be able to share with you a little bit more information on what they're hoping to do. So look out for some information from me on Monday, on Tuesday as well on Internet Day, and next Friday as well, where I'll be part of a fantastic conversation on the same. So I just appreciate people trying to create safe spaces online, offline. We need more of that. In a world that is extremely predatory, volatile, and intrusive, safe spaces are hugely welcome. So thank you. And finally, the fifth and final thing on my mind is the Menstrual Hygiene Inclusion Conference, which, if you follow me on social media, you've seen me talk about. I was inspired to do this convening off the back of my book, My First Time, which, you guys, thank you for your feedback so much. I'm gonna give you more plans and details about the rest of the year for My First Time. So the inclusion conference for me came from the feedback of My First Time, where people were thinking how incredible it was that there were voices they hadn't considered before. Persons who are differently abled, persons who have different experiences than the rest of us, being included in my book. And so the conference is an extension of that, where we're going to have a very inclusive conversation on how menstrual equality looks for everyone, for every girl and woman, and how allies, men, women, girls, boys, can support women and girls to menstruate with dignity. And it's a human right. So it's something we deserve, something that every government needs to implement. And so the Inclusion Conference is happening on Saturday, the 8th of February. I believe by the time the video goes up, there'll be very few slots remaining. And if there are, please register, because I'd love to see you there. And we'll have a policy panel where we will have incredible panelists, and I'll share that information on my social media by the time this video goes up. We're going to talk about how menstrual hygiene policies can be more inclusive, can be more sustainable, and can be more progressive. And then there's the inclusion panel, which I'm also really excited about, where we'll hear from different persons, persons of different religious backgrounds, different abilities from informal settlements, and understand what menstrual justice looks like for them. And then there's something that I've always been passionate about, which is how do we equip more people to be advocates in this space? That's the only way you can amplify impact, right? Because I meet people all the time and they're doing all this incredible work. And so, sorry, I feel like I have a cold coming on. So it's about unveiling a chapter that will raise new champions in the space of menstrual hygiene management intervention. And so that's all going to come to life at the Village Market on the 8th of February. Thank you, Village Market and Trademark, for the partnership, for coming on board, Bluegrass for helping out, Couture Africa, Artlantis, and just everyone who is a part of this process. To the Ministries of Health and Education for, being able to discuss these matters, to UNFPA as well, Hi, Better for Kenya, all these organizations that believe in progressive conversations around women's rights and sexual and reproductive health and rights. So I'm really excited about the conference. I'm nervous, but I'm excited because I think it's necessary, and I hope it's something that goes fantastically well. God, I know you got this, and that we can have over and over again. And each month, I'll be putting together a forum based off of the Inclusion Conference that's going to be countrywide, so look out for that information. to really amplify menstrual health management intervention. So I'm excited. So please look out for that information. Come to the conference. If you've registered, I can't wait to meet you. I hope I get a chance to. And if you haven't registered, please do so. And that's the 5 things on my mind. God, I feel like I was just so hyper today. I don't know why. Just very, very hyper. Not really sure why I'm super wired. I just think it's been, there's a lot on my mind, but good and bad. And I think that's just life. And we just have to learn to process things. We have to get toolkits for processing matters. That's the only way we can cope. Let's learn healthy ways to process information. That's my take home. So, cannot believe I did that again, or that I'm dabbing. I will stop now. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe. Let's grow this family, and I will see you next time. Bye.